Oh, I'm on. Well, welcome. Welcome to History 3000, Section 2, the French Revolution and Napoleon. Just received back copies of the syllabus. Oh, yes. Here you go, Cameron. There you go. I will say a little bit about the unexpected quality of the room. This is a course that has a broadcast component, which only really means that the camera is on me and that our discussion is broadcast to millions and millions of people all over the world. So watch what you say. No, it's broadcast locally here in Colorado Springs, and students can take it. It's offered by continuing education. In fact, if you'd prefer to take it that way, you could take it. But the thing is, in any case, available. And the idea is that you can watch this at home. It's on channel 20, Comcast, and you could see it at home. And it's come on in. You could see it at home. It's broadcast live, and it's also rebroadcast on Friday afternoon, beginning at, I believe, 3 p.m. It's a service. That is, people who are off campus and would like to have the classroom experience, but for one reason or another cannot make it to campus, or cannot make it to campus at a given time, they have this option for the class. And these mics are now, I gather, you don't even need to push a button to be heard on them. And so the things you say will be heard off campus as well. I should say the camera's on me, which means they can't see you. So the chance of you being called to account in 7-Eleven while you're trying to put gas in your car because of some comment that you made about Napoleon that some random individual took offense with, that just will not happen. And I think you'll become very used to this. And remember that it is a service for those off campus, and also a service. Many people just tune in and want to get an idea of this, but have no interest in the 3 credits that they would get for signing up for the class. So that explains the layout here. Does anyone still need a copy of the syllabus? Are you all set with the syllabus? Okay. Let me go through the syllabus then with you. By the way, did anyone not get a copy of the flyer about the Wonderly Scholarships and the Florence Murphy Scholarship? That really is something to bear in mind if you are a history major, because those are competitive scholarships, but there certainly is money available for that. Now, on to the syllabus. Identifies the course. I just tried to explain what CUNET is and why the contraption exists as it does. I am Professor Sackett. My office is in Columbine 1015. That's in the basement of the office wing of the Columbine building. There's my phone. Glad to receive calls about the course or about UCCS, the history department, or anything that I might know anything about at home. I do ask that you not call after 8 in the evening. I've always asked that. I've always given out my phone number and always asked not to get calls after 8 in the evening, but the reasons have changed. In the beginning, I was putting small children to bed. Those children are now in their late 20s and early 30s, respectively, and do not need to be put to bed particularly. But now I have grandchildren that I occasionally am watching, trying to put to bed. I'm nowhere near as effective at that as I was with their mother, that's for sure. But in any case, and also I just, at my age, I think I just thin out in the evening, and I don't know what kind of advice I would be able to give you. But other than that, call me. Cafe hours, yeah, I have those in place of office hours. Although I'm glad to meet with you in the office if we need a time of mutual convenience to meet. The cafe in question is the UCCS coffee shop. For those of you new to campus, that's the cafe that stretches out along that rectangular hallway off the east entrance to the library, right? In other words, if you went up these stairs and went into the library through the west entrance, you'd go all the way through the library, exit at the east entrance, exit. Off to your left is the cafe, and that's where I will be every Tuesday afternoon from 1 o'clock until 3:30 in the afternoon. We have a writing fellow. She's right here, Andrea Martins. Andrea Martins was also my writing fellow for a course last semester that several of you were in, so she's no stranger to you. She is here to help with writing assignments. And that, well, I mean, you'll hear more about that. I don't know if you wanted to say anything in particular about it. Should I launch on, or how do you want to?
Just don't be afraid to ask me for anything. You can send me your draft. You can send me whatever you feel like. I also have office hours, which I was going to ask if Monday at this class time, but on Mondays was a good time for everybody in this class, or if that was just completely not a good time for anybody. I just wanted to make sure that Mondays are on. What would be like a good time? Does anybody have any ideas? Is everybody available on Mondays around this time?
Some yes, some no. I see some shaking heads.
Would you be okay with me sending you a copy? I mean, we might not be able to meet face to face.
Email?
Okay.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, anything you guys can do. Either meet with me face to face on my office hours.
Yeah.
I'll send out an email about what times that'll be on Monday. Or you can email it over. So,
Yeah.
I'll make sure, even if you feel like, oh, maybe she can't get to this the day before it's due, give me the benefit of the doubt and I'll do my best. So don't feel like you can't ask for help just because you're behind.
Now, are these office hours every week?
Yeah, that's what
Okay. All right. Okay. Good, good, good. And yeah, I think the interest will warm up as the writing assignments are handed out and as they come due. Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. And she's very good at this. Very good at this. She puts a lot of herself into the evaluation of writing, and I think from all the information I ever got, helped a good deal last semester. So, on to the description. A close examination of this period of French and European history in regard to causation of the revolution, its several phases, and also the emergence of the revolutionary general Napoleon Bonaparte as an emperor. We will consider events and their implications for change in government, society, the economy, and culture in France and also elsewhere in Europe. Special attention will be given to the history of democracy, warfare, nationalism, gender relations. Hi there. You would like a syllabus? There you go. There you go.
Thank you.
Sure, Robert. To the history of democracy, warfare, nationalism, gender relations, and the French peasantry. European developments will also be placed in their global context. There follows then a list of the 7 books that I have ordered for the class. Now, as of this morning, the library was sold out on all but one. But I visited with Erica Weed, who told me that others had been ordered. They are coming. In fact, coming soon, end of this week is the assumption. Also, the library has a service, if you go online, or I suppose you could do this I'm sorry, not the library, the bookstore has a service. If you go online to the UCCS bookstore, or if you go to the UCCS bookstore, I assume, you could put in a special order for a specific book. You would receive an email when it arrived, and in this way reserve a copy. So there's that. Who does not have, for example, Tackett, The Coming of the Terror in the French? You don't have it yet. Who else does not have it? You ordered it.
I actually ended up ordering mine from Amazon.
From Amazon. Okay. Well, there's certainly the Amazon option. When does Amazon say yours will appear?
So I have Amazon Prime through the student account they have. By the way, if you're a student, you can get it. So it'll be 2-day shipping, so mine should come by Friday.
By Friday. Okay.
I ordered it.
I got
Okay.
all my books for this class for like $50.
By
Through Amazon.
through Amazon. Okay. Okay. All right, so there are those options. I sometimes use Abe Books, which is kind of a warehouse, in fact, an internet warehouse of used books. I've been satisfied with them. So there are options to get these books. Tackett is the one I asked about because it's the lead book and wanted to make sure that everyone was able to plow into that between now and next week, Wednesday. So here they are: Tackett, The Coming of the Terror in the French Revolution; Peter McPhee, Living the French Revolution; Suzanne Dessin, The Family on Trial in Revolutionary France; Suzanne Dessin with others, The French Revolution in Global Perspective; Susan Buck-Morse, Hegel, Haiti, and Universal History; Mike Rapport, The Napoleonic Wars; and Raphael Blaufarb, Napoleon, Symbol for an Age, which is a collection of documents. Requirements for the course: 3 papers, a 3 to 4 page paper, which will be 10% of the final grade, then a second 3 to 4 page paper, which will be 30% of the final grade, then a 6 to 8 page paper, which will be 50% of the final grade, with attendance participation at 10%. Now, off campus, those of you off campus, obviously I can hardly require attendance and participation since the idea is that you do not attend. I will calibrate those percentages for you so that that is fair. Then I say this course is conceived and the professor has applied for its designation as a writing intensive course. In other words, a course in which attention is given to critical analytical writing as a process. In fact, I submitted that application at the end of the last semester, but the committee that gives the approval had met for the last time that semester, so it's on the agenda for the next meeting. I have it on authority from Dr. Neely, who is the head of the, what is she head of? She's the head of the Writing Intensive Curriculum. I'm not sure what her exact, she's got lots of titles, but I think she might even be head of, acting head of Compass Curriculum just now. She's a busy woman, that's for sure. And she's the one that's arranged for Andrew to be with us. She told me that the approval would be forthcoming and that it would be retroactive to the beginning of this semester. So if you count on this course for writing intensive, then that should be no trouble. Assignments include peer review and/or review by the professor and writing fellow, followed by revision and resubmission. In other words, you always get feedback on what you submit, and you can always, well, it's assigned that you resubmit. For these assignments, as from class discussion, we will consider the question what it means to be responsible in regards to history, both when we talk about how historians generate an analysis of the past based upon documentation, and also when you write responses to other historians or when you write about documents yourselves. Note, grades for papers cover all steps of the assignment, so that you're given a grade on a given paper for the total for the total product from the initial submission to the resubmission. Let me say about something else. The issue of plagiarism. I always say something about plagiarism at the beginning of a class. I always find it unpleasant as a subject. Hi, hey, how are you? You have a copy of the syllabus?
No, no.
Here you go, here you go. Cassidy.
Yes.
All right, there you are. Mm-hmm. I've been on the faculty here for 33 years. Did you need a copy of the syllabus? There you go, there you go. My pleasure. And I would say for the majority of those 33 years, I never addressed plagiarism in class, not once. It would come up once every 5 years. It seemed by a kind of law of nature. Whatever the problem, I would deal with it, but it seemed inappropriate to broadcast it in a group of students. But then, in the most foolish misstep of my career, I got into low-level administration, which is my way of saying I became director of humanities for 8 years. And then I became chair of the history department for 8 more years. I was actually I had both those roles in one particular year. And that meant that the issues of plagiarism that came to me came not only from my own courses, but 70 or 80 or 100 in any given semester. And I began to see what a problem it was. So I thought, well, you should always say something at the beginning of every class. No matter if it's unpleasant, no matter if you know several of the students and their integrity is above any suspicion. No reason to suspect anybody in here for that matter. But I always say something because, in those roles that I assumed, I had to deal with people who had been accused of plagiarism correctly. And this would be a 3-way meeting, the professor in question, the student in question, and I would be there too. And we would hash this out. And for the most part, what I saw were people who were, who really had wanted to do the right thing, had come under a time crunch, done something foolish, not that hard to track down a plagiarized paper, a source that has been used for a plagiarized paper, and then, there's a great deal of upset in the room. The student was always or often mortified by what they had done, and and then there's this list of steps that can be taken in the way of a penalty, which the professor and I would decide upon. But I thought, and I think my colleagues probably do the same thing, at least in the history department, probably across campus. I thought, always say something about this. Remember what is at issue in plagiarism. Remember what is at issue and why it creates the turmoil that it does and the consequences that it does. At a university, we're all about the exchange of ideas. How do you invest that process with any integrity if in the end nobody knows whose ideas they are? That's the trouble with plagiarism. That's the trouble with it. And that's why I give this little talk, which I hope not to have to repeat. It's it's an awful it's an awful scenario that unfolds. Really think about it. Think about the issue just for a moment of integrity at a university. What if I said to you right now, I don't believe what I just said? That's a speech. Anybody can find it on the internet. I memorized it. I gave it word for word. My delivery, was it any good? Well, all of a sudden, if I've, so to speak, plagiarized what I just said to you, then what's my relationship to you and you to me? If I'm just a kind of actor up here, then there's no integrity at all. And that's why it's so important that people not plagiarize. I know that you're under time pressure and people, at the university and, we demand too many papers and we demand too much of this and we demand too much of that. I know that. But don't plagiarize because that then just, that just creates the wrench in the works. And I know you get this message again and again, but I thought, based on my experience, that I should be one of those who gives the message again and again. So, okay. And the whole thing is covered in the UCCS catalog. You can find out what plagiarism is defined to be, and under the let's see, it's called the Academic Honor Code. So, enough. Next, I'll be telling people now. Remember to wash your bed sheets at least every 2 weeks. Okay. Well, on the next page of the syllabus, the schedule with the various topics that we wend our way through these 7 books and these other readings. By the way, the other readings are on Blackboard as well. I'm not sure if you scrolled down from where I placed the syllabus, but there are 3 other readings. One by Hegel. Part of my job description is to bewilder students, and I think in the 10 pages that I selected from Hegel's lectures on the philosophy of history, I have met that obligation. And you have a book that Hegel is the great philosopher of history of that age, and he was very affected by the French Revolution, very affected by Napoleon. He saw in Napoleon what he called the final realization of the absolute idea. You can even think of that as providence. Hegel does not discourage us from thinking of that as providence. So I assigned 10 relevant pages from his philosophy, from his lectures on the philosophy of history, and then a book that points out how little he saw of history when he latched on to Napoleon as this fulfillment of this universal design to human history. So if you look at the syllabus, you know, the assignments, the things the issues as we come to them. Paper 1 gets assigned on February the 3rd, and student referees get assigned. Let me explain the idea of that. That will happen only once, but that's part of this whole process of writing intensive. Each of you will have a student referee, and each of you will be a student referee in turn. And the idea is that you submit the very initial draft of that paper to the student referee for his or her comments, so that he or she helps you as you in turn are helping someone else whose paper you have read. The paper, when the first draft then goes to the student referee 1 week after that, and we expect that the student referee complete the turnaround in 1 week. In other words, when you get the paper from your student, which needs to be on time, you need to be on time as well, because the whole process depends upon you in your role as student referee. We do this because people who research this kind of thing, like Dr. Neely, convince us that dealing with writing peer-to-peer helps in a way that dealing with writing student to professor or sometimes student to writing fellow does not. So we've worked that in to the one assignment here. Then the first draft comes, and you staple, that is 2 weeks then later, the first draft comes, and you append to it the referee's comments on the first draft, and you append to that the final draft, and you turn that into me. Then later, this would be on March the 2nd, paper 2 is assigned, and then the first draft to me and to the writing fellow, 2 copies. That is, this goes to Andrea as well, to me and to Andrea. Then then we return that. Look what I've done to our spring break. I've ruined our spring break.
Did you do that for Thanksgiving?
No, I ruined their Thanksgiving. Our Thanksgiving was spared. Yeah, it's our turn to suffer. So, yeah, then, and you'll get the idea then the rest of the way down that there's always a submission, feedback, and then resubmission. And I'm not sure that on my own I would have come to the idea that peer review was the big help that Dr. Neely has convinced me that it is. But I think on my own I would have come to the idea that receiving comments from the 2 of us will be a help. So I hope it is. And then this goes all the way down to the end. I would have you bear in mind only that our last class meeting is May the 4th. We do not meet May the 11th. 2 days after that, however, which is May the 13th, Friday at noon, on that third paper, the first draft with the writing fellow's comments and the final draft are due in 2 copies to the professor's office, my office, Columbine 1015. So that all awaits you. Yes?
So we turn in paper copies of the paper and not online?
Yes, please. Mm-hmm. That's right. Any other questions about that? Any other questions? Now, the last paper is also somewhat longer. It's the one that's 6 to 8 pages, and I haven't quite settled on a decision about that, but some of that will have to do with primary source material, which you may know in the trade means contemporary documentation, so that you become, the historian and not just commenting on what some other historian has said about all of this. So you have these 7 books, and then the 3 things on the shorter readings. By the way, I stopped to make some. Sorry, yeah. Oh, sorry, your hand.
The dates are kind of confusing with the way.
Okay.
I just want to be clear, like February 3rd is assigned.
Yeah.
February 10th is due.
Right.
February 24th is due.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of under the date.
It's under the date.
Okay.
Paper 2 is assigned
Perfect. Thank
March the 2nd. You're welcome, and so forth down through the remainder. Brian, your hand had been up.
Quotation, like with block quotations and stuff, do you allow block quotations or a certain limit, 30% of the paper block?
By block, you mean indented?
Yes.
I never set a percentage on that. What I try to do is convey the idea that if you overquote, then you've taken from yourself room that you would need to analyze what you've quoted. So better to shore a quotation down to exactly the verbiage you need to make your point, so that then you can explain what that point is. Other questions or concerns about there will be prompts, even about the role of writing referee, there will be prompts. So this will all come clear to you, I hope, what these assignments will be, what your role will be in due time. Yes?
So, is topics an appropriate questions that you could ask right now?
I mean, do I know the topics? No, it's perfectly appropriate. I don't know the answer to it, though. I always come up with these things, a few days before the assignment gets. For one thing, I know the subject, but I need to look through the material week by week myself, and I also like to see kind of the direction of class discussion before I say that would be a nice topic. So, no doubt I'm often wrong, but
I'm taking thesis this semester, and I'm already
all right, okay. Well, yeah, you'll certainly get this in due time, and let me see how much. I mean, from your first draft to your final draft due of paper 1, I mean, you have 3 weeks. On paper 2, well, I mean, that covers nearly a month, although spring break is also in there. But it's no, you have well more than a month. And the 3rd, let's see, that's assigned on April 13th. The first draft comes due on April 27th. I've tried to leave adequate time.
Yeah, I'm just neurotic.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that. And I know the senior thesis is, who in here has written the senior thesis and passed? There, you see? She looks perfectly healthy. Yeah, there you go. See? The voice of the people, the voice of God, right? All right. There you go. Because people do get through that thing. For one thing, I don't know who all in. I mean, I don't even think it's on my roster who's a history major and who is not. But as far as the senior thesis goes, everybody tries to organize that so as to, I mean, all my colleagues, so as to, and I do too, to prevent, blind alleys where you spend 3 weeks working on something and then, oh my word, I can't get the source material or something like that. And we try to anticipate that sort of problem in the way we organize the class. So, and I'm sure, I don't know who you have for senior thesis, but I'm sure that, okay, all right. Yeah, she's great at that kind of thing.
I know.
She'll be on top of that.
I'm neurotic in general.
All right. Well,
Not just this.
all right. I see. Okay. Well, the university is a good place for people who are neurotic, right? All right. We're all. Why would we be here if we weren't? Yeah. I took this job in 1982. 1982. I was working in a bookstore in West Germany, what was then West Germany, Düsseldorf. I'd gotten my doctorate. I kept, floating an application here and there back in the United States. I thought I would probably end up as an expatriate, still be in the bookstore. But I sent an application to this job, and Rick Wonderly, Professor Rick Wonderly, whose picture is on some of those flyers that you got about the scholarship, I'm still in contact with him. Now a professor emeritus, was on the other end. Could I come to Colorado Springs for an interview? So I came. And it was late. They were late with their interviewing process, so they pretty much had to like me, and I got the job. And I said, well, what do I teach? What do I teach? It was like June of, 2 months later, I needed to be in the class. He said, well, a modern Europeanist, so we want you to teach the French Revolution. We figured that would be. I said, oh, fine, I'll do that. So it's the first course I taught. And it was in my stock for, I would say 15, 18 years, something like that. I taught it recurrently. And then, my teaching responsibility shifted a little bit. My teaching habits shifted, I guess, a little bit, and I haven't been back to the French Revolution for, I would say, 15 years. So it is a return. It was a return for me to the subject with which I began, at least my teaching career. And that means also that it is a return to the scholarship on the French Revolution, such as has been produced in particular in the 15 years that have interceded between the last time I taught it and today. And I must say that there's been a certain fascination with me in looking through what for me is altogether new literature. A fascination in part because I have seen history advance, that is, historical scholarship, the discipline of history, as regards this one topic, the French Revolution and Napoleon. I've seen history advance in the two ways that history can advance. On the one hand, new material has been read and evaluated by historians, and they do indeed help us to know more about the French Revolution than we knew before, or at least that I knew on the basis of what I was reading at this prior time in my career. Also, new questions have been asked about the French Revolution. New concerns have been brought to bear upon the French Revolution and Napoleon. And everywhere I have been reading on this subject from this more recent literature, I have seen fruitful new work. And so it's with a great deal of excitement that I turn to this subject once again. Take Tackett, for example, the one that I decided upon at the last minute to be the lead source. I see several of you with the Tackett book. He delves into individual testimony about the 5 years of the French Revolution that culminated with the Reign of Terror in a way that I had never seen it delved into before. I mean, he tells you a good deal about the leading figures. He tells you a good deal about Robespierre and Brissot and Danton, figures whose names people have always come to know when they studied the French Revolution. But he also has got his hands on private diaries, private correspondence between people who were not leading lights of the Revolution, whose name no one but experts knew, or no one at all. And they add their perspective. And it's particularly in Paris, which was the center where these events unfolded from 1789 until 1794, and the result is, I think, spectacular. Also, the Reign of Terror is an old subject of interest. Why should it not be? Why should it not be to Americans? Because after all, our revolution went, the Revolutionary War had been won, the War of Independence had been won. We proceeded to a constitution, and while there was a great deal of turmoil and violence along the way, it's not as though the Americans of that day were not treated to the spectacle of Benjamin Franklin executing George Washington, who and then being executed in turn by Thomas Jefferson, who was executed in turn by, we do not have that spectacle of lurid violence in our revolution, but the French do. And the thing that you always said about, it seemed to me, the thing you always said about the terror by way of explanation is, well, one of two things. You said these people were obsessed by their ideas. And so in effect, you laid the terror of the French Revolution, the sheer violence, the bloodletting, the extraordinary cruelty of the French Revolution, you laid that at the door of the Enlightenment. The trouble was the Enlightenment produced new ideas. There was a built-in proclivity of people who responded to those ideas to respond with extreme commitment, to respond excessively, and that is why the terror was so, that is why it came to existence in the first place. Or you said, well, by then France was at war, and desperate times call for desperate measures, and these people thought they were, so they were idealists, and they were also idealists with their backs against the wall, because by 1794, the coalition against France had been enlarged from Austria and Prussia to include Spain and Great Britain, and desperate people do desperate things, and that's why they set up the guillotine. That's why there was this tremendous bloodletting, not only in Paris, but in other centers of the revolution as well. And that's what you said. And that went as far as it went in terms of people's understanding. But what Tackett manages to do is divide this entire question of the terror out into different aspects. I'm tempted to say different stages, although it's not clear that it's always directly chronological in case of a given individual who went on to perpetrate terror. Yes, there are the ideas to begin with, but he points out that the ideas were so diffuse, the ideas were so diverse and varied that it's hard to say that there was any particular set of ideas that were derived from the Enlightenment that impressed these revolutionaries of the first hour and with which they became obsessed. Take the question of religion. What should the revolution accomplish with regard to religion? Should it blow religion away as much as it can, interpreting it as a tradition that is in some way underwritten a social order of extreme injustice? Should they do that? Or should they practice religious toleration? Well, you can draw both conclusions. It's hard to ascribe the revolution to the ideas that preceded it or the ideas that influenced the revolutionaries in 1789, because those ideas were they pointed in different directions. I'll put it that way. So for Tackett, it's different. These are men who start out with a great deal of generosity, almost a bounty in their soul with regard to what the new France can give to the French, with regard to what the new France can give to the world. They spoke about a new man who would deal with fellow men not in the awareness of a social hierarchy or even a racial hierarchy that kept people apart one from another. Rather, they would be on an equal footing. I mean, they took the slogans of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity, and they lived in accordance with those slogans. That's what they imagined they were establishing. And they thought that with the slightest push, the old regime, with all its injustice and all of the ideas that underpinned it, would simply vanish. That they were on the dawn of a new era. There is that phase to the French Revolution. I mean, if I may, people seemed nice for a short time in the French Revolution. But then, not everyone was in accordance with what the revolutionaries wanted. no matter how broad and how tolerant the revolutionaries tried to be, there were those who stood outside. Old members of the nobility, for example, who from the very first went into exile to, in protest against the French Revolution. Priests who, particularly higher clergy, who were at odds with the efforts to shake away the privileges of the Catholic Church. Not everyone was quite in step, in other words. And this generated slowly resentments, that there were those who were not following the wanted course. There were those who were not following the path toward a grand vision of humanity that the revolutionaries thought was, whose appeal the revolutionaries assumed would be universal. And out of this came a fear of those, and a suspicion that some of them might actually be engaged in some kind of conspiracy against the French Revolution. Well, those who had gone into exile clearly were conspiring against the French Revolution, but the revolutionaries tended to exaggerate that. And then they tended to identify the revolution so much with themselves as individuals that even fellow revolutionaries who differed, often by only an iota, from their vision of what the revolutionary should be, what the revolution should accomplish, they linked them with the conspiracy too. That is, they too they're just like the priests who want to reestablish the full power of the Catholic Church, the bishops, the archbishops, and so forth. They're just like the Pope. They're just like the nobles who've gone into exile in the German states, and they're conspiring against us in Koblenz. They're just like it, these other revolutionaries. And it's in the midst of this that the idea that the secret lay in the execution of enemies took root. It wasn't there from 1789. But I think from Tackett you'll see the unfolding of a history. See, this is a different kind of revolution. We say, well, the Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, there have been revolutions. Those later revolutions had professional revolutionaries, people who knew from the first hour what they wanted to accomplish, people who had worked in secret against the old regime, for years, for decades. That's true of Lenin, that's true of Castro, that's true of Ho Chi Minh. It's not true of anybody here. It's not true of anybody here. If you'd asked even the great leaders of the revolution, Robespierre, Brissot, Danton, at the beginning of 1789, what they thought they were setting out to accomplish, they would have said, a reform of the monarchy. There were no regicides in 1789. That came later. There were no terrorists in 1789. That came later. Important to see this thing unfold in all of its complexity. And then, in addition to the process that I tried to describe a moment ago, how you get from love of ideals to the guillotine, on top of that, there is in fact a war. There's an overlay of war, which only makes people all the more desperate, and there's an overlay of personal paranoia. Your author makes clear that Brissot and Robespierre, the two great opponents in the National Convention, that they were intolerant, paranoid human beings. And intolerance and paranoia do not need to come to the surface in times of relative calm, but in times of desperation they did. And Robespierre was quite convinced that opposition to him signaled really conspiracy against the revolution. But you'll see all this. I mean, Tackett lays it out much better than I am doing here. It's a lesson in how little is said when we say people who are committed to their ideas are inclined to commit violence. When that kind of explanation of violence is put out into the air, the French Revolution can be looked at as a kind of model study of how much more is involved when people turn violent. Also, look at the book by McPhee. It's a great book. He's the great historian today of the peasantry. Say, well, why the peasantry? The events were in Paris. Robespierre was a lawyer. He was not a peasant after all. But 85 to 90% of the country was peasant. This was before the Industrial Revolution had hit France, before commerce and industry had taken off to the degree that it would several decades later. The country remained a country of peasant villages. Peasants in some relationship to a local lord to whom they owed all manner of obligations. I mean, feudalism, if you've studied that from the history of the European Middle Ages, feudalism had for the most part fallen into disuse. That is, the peasants were not serfs, but they still had all manner of obligation to the local lord, whether the lord was a nobleman of the Catholic Church, or the king, or a wealthy family from the town that had bought up land. Virtually every peasant had something in return for the use of the land, even in return for, quote, ownership of the land that had to be given to the lord. And how the peasantry would interact with Paris. How impulses would not only come to the peasantry from Paris in the way of revolutionary decrees, but go back to Paris from peasant responses. I mean, that's a great deal of the story, and Peter McPhee is good on that. Also, historians, the thing that drives history, more I think even than the unearthing of new sources, though there is some of that, is that new times suggest new questions to ask of the past. If in 76, when I sat for my master's oral exams on my way to my doctorate, and the French Revolution was one of the subjects on which I was examined, if someone had said to me, tell me something about the environment in regard to the French Revolution, I think I would have drawn a complete blank. I knew nothing about environmental concerns, but there were environmental concerns. There were concerns in every peasant village about, who gets to cut down what lumber and for what woodland, for who gets to clear brush away from what potential pasture land and use it, and on what terms. It's amazing the extent to which that issue was at the heart of the French Revolution for the peasantry. And again, we say, well, the peasantry. I mean, Karl Marx looked at the peasantry and said, aha, there is the idiocy of rural life. Well, be that as it may, these people were so numerous that their take on the French Revolution was in general the take that stood. And global history. To look into the way in which impulses from the entire world, based on the tremendous age of commerce and exploration that had begun in the 16th century, impulses from the entire world came in to touch France, and the way France in turn sent impulses out into the entire world. That too is a question that when I was in graduate school in the 1970s went unasked, but now it has to be asked. One of the things that you will note as we go along with this is that the most impressive slave rebellion in history happened in a slave colony, and only in part because of ideas that the slaves had received from revolutionary France. I refer to Haiti, which had been the French colony of Saint-Domingue, and which entered into revolt at the beginning of this period in 1790, and which entailed the proclamation of freedom for the slaves, not elimination of the slave trade. That we know. Freedom for the slaves, and who even fought off the effort by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1802 to reimpose slavery, and held on to their independence down unto the present day, Haiti. I mean, a fascinating chapter to this entire history. But as I say, a chapter that is lost if the global perspective is ignored in favor of a simply national or even European perspective. And the wars are so fascinating. I mean, France was at war from 1792 all the way through. The motives changed at the very beginning. in keeping with the revolutionary spirit, what the French meant to do was export the revolution, export these grand ideals elsewhere in Europe to Belgium, then called the Austrian Netherlands, to the Low Countries, to Switzerland, northern Italy. But it was not too far into the thing that the motive for war, the rationale for war, became the war of defense of the fatherland, and then not too far into the thing beyond that when it simply became imperialism, to impose French control with some kind of window dressing of liberty, fraternity, and equality elsewhere in Europe. And that would go all the way to the gates of Moscow, all the way into Moscow under Napoleon, by which point the idea of humanitarian ideals were quite lost. But I'm very impressed by this short book by Mike Report on the war. What's it called? Sorry, the Napoleonic Wars, exactly. Because one of the things he establishes, I've never seen it established quite so well, is that to a large degree, when you strip away the idealism that attended these wars, or this impulse to war in revolutionary France, to a very large degree, the French were simply acting upon the imperatives of great power politics, of great power rivalry, such as existed before 1789 and would go on to exist after 1815, in other words, after the fall of Napoleon. That there's a great deal more continuity about the foreign posture, the foreign aggression of revolutionary France than you take in at first glance. The point here is not to somehow de-Napoleonize Napoleon and turn him into Louis XV or something like that. Yeah, he added his ambition, his striving for empire, his striving for fame. No question. But the point is to make it clear that that the role he played in history was not something he dreamed up on his own. That to some extent he fits in a line of French policy, French war that preceded him. Gender relations, an important subject, and a very important subject. This is a revolution that both adjusted laws of property so that women had more control over property within a family than they ever had before. It is a revolution that made divorce easier on the grounds of, and women took advantage of this on the grounds of abusive husbands, violent husbands, neglectful husbands. Although Napoleon would close that down in a kind of reaction against it. But this is also a revolution that took up the issue of feminism, in other words, the vote for women, and in acts of extraordinary fury, struck that issue back down and dealt with feminists themselves, male or female, on the guillotine. And that's where that issue ended when it came to the question of, in a democracy, which France had become on paper, in a democracy, do both the sexes vote? Or is it only, when we say man, do we mean the male sex alone? Fascinating, fascinating. The French Revolution excites so much influence because look how much it did. Whether it accomplished things or not, it raised issues that are with us still today. The whole question of, well, how do you proceed from the ideal of liberty or from the idea of equality? How do you proceed to a constitution? Sometimes I look at the French Revolution and I see it as a kind of whirlwind of constitutions, because not only do they have their Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen from the 26th of August, 1789, but they push ahead in their initial assembly. France still a monarchy at this time. They aim toward a constitutional monarchy. They push ahead to the Constitution of 1791. That's changed. A new assembly called the Convention issues a new constitution, 1793. Almost one man, one vote. Almost full democracy in the way that idea would be understood in the late 18th century. Not women, as I said a moment ago, but then as a kind of revulsion against not only the reign of terror, but the democratic constitution that the terrorists had issued but never acted upon. There's a new constitution under the Directory in 1795, and then, of course, everything that Napoleon, all of the vehicles that Napoleon mounted in order to exercise his power all the way to the founding of the empire. There's a great deal of you can reflect on in light of the French Revolution around the question, what is a constitution? Because there's so many of them. And then, of course, all the polarization, all the violence. It really would be as though Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington and John Adams had arranged to have each other killed. It really would be something like that to imagine this revolution. The French Revolution also put in terms as graphic as I think could be put in the 18th century, almost as graphic as they could be put in the 18th century. When we say the liberty of the individual, what does that mean with respect to the poor? Is it enough to say you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of religion, you have freedom of the press, you have freedom to assemble? So you have the entire catalog of rights, freedoms, but should you also have the right to vote? Or does property, wealth, confer the stake in government that is necessary to confer the right to vote, to acknowledge the right to vote? You'll see the French Revolution answered that question in different ways at different times. Does the poor man get to vote? Years later, in what was called the July Monarchy, which came into existence in 1830, not in our subject at all, a delegation of working men came to see the Prime Minister at the time, Guizot, and they called, at that time, 240,000 men constituted the electorate of France, in a nation of, by then, 28 millions or something. It was based upon property. It was a property franchise, property right to vote. They stated their case for the right to vote for the working men, to which he said, enrichez-vous, enrich yourselves. That's what you need to do to get the right to vote. You know, lift yourself to that threshold of taxation, property ownership that we've set as the threshold of the right to vote, and that's the only way for you to be satisfied. Should the revolution guarantee, should the Constitution guarantee any kind of material basis to life? In other words, the idea of what came in the 20th century throughout Europe, also the United States, to be called the social welfare state. We know which is the parent of Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. And related to that, I think also public education, right? The revolution took, in one of its phases, it took, I would say, spasmodic and haphazard and often violent steps to deal with that question in the favor of the poor, even if it meant no more than the confiscation of grain and its sale at set prices. I mean, I take it that that is a moment in the direction of what in the 20th century would come to be the welfare state. And what about slavery? The French had slaves. They had slaves in Saint-Domingue. I pointed to that a moment ago. The French freed in 1791 free people of color in their colonies. They represented a minority, for example, in Saint-Domingue, which would become Haiti. In 1794, they abolished slavery. And that would be later until Napoleon would reintroduce it every place but Haiti in the early years of the 19th century. And slavery was not abolished in France until 1848. Well, when I put it that way, it makes these revolutionaries seem like idealists that we should all laud and magnify. I don't see it that way. I see that they were men who by 1794 knew in effect that colonies in revolt would be hard for them to keep. And I think that the idea of the Enlightenment, the idea of liberty, had at least made liberty of the slaves a conceivable issue, something that a rational man could sit down and contemplate. And for that combination of factors, in a kind of impulse, they liberated the slaves. I also would have to say, and you will read about this, some of you will read it, I divide out the readings a little bit later in the semester, some of you will read about the case of French Guiana, which was a colony in the very northern part of South America, and you'll see how little the freedom of the slaves meant, where it depended only upon revolutionary edicts. In that regard, the Haitians got it right. They had to basically burn the institution of slavery on their part of the island, and and be ready to butcher the slaveholders. And that really is why slavery remained dead letter in Haiti, because it was reimposed elsewhere. But I mean, you'll read in this piece, or some of you will read in this piece about French Guiana, that slavery was abolished, but the administrators kept slaves on their plantations with other types of arrangement that in effect amounted to slavery. That the life of the slave did not change all that much. The life of the freed person did not change that much from slavery, I should say. Did you know that French Guinea still exists as a part of France? I had no idea of that. I found that out this morning. And the source that I was reading said that it was a territory that had been inhabited by Native Americans until Europeans and Africans joined them in the 18th century. And I thought, now that's a way to put it. Oh, the only one. Okay, right. And they use the euro. I read that too. Yeah, they use the euro. They're citizens, right? They can vote. Yeah. I had no idea of that. I don't know what I thought became of it, but I did not know that it remained a part of France. So, anyway. And then, of course, the whole issue of women. To take such a zigzag course on legislation for women, but in the end, not only deny the right to vote, although there were advocates for feminism in the assemblies and then in the National Convention, to deny the right to vote and then lead those who continued to advocate it to the guillotine. And that's quite a spectacle too. That's quite a spectacle too for us to try to explain and understand. I think in any history, as much as possible, the focus in one sense has to be a dual focus between the lives of individuals and how they experienced the past and what values they brought to bear, what choices they made, what decisions they made, and why. That has to be there. There also has to be this sense of the general development of structures, from this form of government to that form of government, from this set of laws to that set of laws. And what I hope these authors do for you is put together a combination of those two, so that you bounce back and forth between the two perspectives. Never lose track of the individual, but never get so involved with the individual that it seems like a personal story as opposed to the grand historical event that it was. You have questions about any of this? Well, in that case, I would like to, I don't mean to keep you today for the entire time, but let me go through names, okay? I mean, I know some of your names, but let me make sure that this, I think I printed this out the other day. And first, do we have Edmund Bedouanan? Okay, do you go by Edmund? And do I say Bedouanan? Okay. Cameron, I saw you. Oh, by the way, let me ask you a question. Edmund, this says you're a junior. And what is your major, if I may? Education and history, okay. Cameron says you're a junior. That's correct. And I know you're a history major. Brian says you're a senior and a history major. History minor. Okay. What is your major, if I may?
Major in criminal justice.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting combo, isn't it? Yeah, now John Callahan is not here, and I know why not. He is in our roster of off-campus. So hello, John. Let me mark that. Erica says you're a senior, and is your major history? Okay, I thought so. Because of the course you took. That's been a few years ago. A couple of years ago. Dr. Hill and I taught that. Dylan Demers. Okay, do you go by Dylan?
Yes.
Okay, Dylan says you're a sophomore.
Technically it's junior.
Junior. Ah, they're stingy. They're so stingy on these things. All right. And history major. Okay, very good. How about Dune Dills? Okay, Dune. You go by Dune? Dune, this says you're unclassified.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Are you in process of becoming classified, or are you just going to stay unclassified?
I will stay unclassified.
All right, good for you. There's an independent spirit. Then you wouldn't have declared a major as an unclassified student. Okay. All right, very good, very good. Let's see, Andrea Falkenberg. You go by Andrea? Okay. Andrea, this says you're a senior. And what is your major?
History.
History. Daniel. Where's he? Daniel's not here. Okay, well, he's on the roster anyway. So, Daniel Fortis, that is. Christy Greer. Okay, Christy says you're a sophomore. Okay. See, they're trying to squeeze as much out of you as they possibly can. All right. And what is your major, please? Geography. Okay, good. Good. You know, I didn't really get to those two other pieces that are on Blackboard, the shorter readings. One is by William Sewell, and it's about how it is that the French came to recognize the taking of the Bastille, which is a prison in Paris, on July the 14th, 1789, how it is they came to recognize that as the crucial event. You know, it's like the midnight ride of Paul Revere. Somebody has to say, hey, that was remarkable. And it's an article about that whole question of, you know, who decided to seize upon this one event among many possible events as the emblem of the revolution. And the other one is by, let's see, what's his name? David Blackburn. It's about the way in which, I mean, when Napoleon came into the Rhineland and France established control in the Rhineland, whether it was through annexation, that's the western part of Germany, and the northern Rhineland, or whether it was by establishing some, like, sort of buffer states, more in the southern Rhineland, it became possible in Germany in a way that had never been before to deal with the Rhine, that is the Rhine River that ran through all of Western Germany, as a problem. Namely, how can we render this river more suited for navigation than it ever has been because of sandbanks and meandering and villages that are misplaced along its banks and that sort of thing. So I think from geography you'll be interested just to see how the revolution made that possible, because you could bring a few people together to agree on it rather than the 20 or 30 that you would have had to before Napoleon. So, you know. Okay, Christy. Then let's see, Danielle Gregory is not here, but I knew she was not going to be here. Rihanna. Hi.
How's it going?
Fine. How are you?
Good, I missed you.
Okay. Well, I missed you too. Glad to have you here. We'll ask for some occasional reflections on European movies.
Yeah.
You're a sophomore, right? Or are you a junior?
No, I'm a junior.
All right. See, they do this all the time.
But
And
I'm double majoring, so I don't know if that affects it at all. I don't know.
I don't know. What's your other major?
Teaching.
Okay, so you're history and education as well. I don't know how that works. I don't know whether that.
It's the same, you just have to take less history classes and then you graduate with a history degree and a license.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm technically a junior, but it's on
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Fallon Gill is not here because she told me she wasn't going to be here. So. Sydney Hellman. Hi. Sydney, this says you're a sophomore. Pardon? Junior, okay. See, there's an accountant over there in Main Hall who's thinking about all of you and how to turn your junior status back to sophomore status. What is your major, please? English, okay. Very good. Very good. English. The great novel about all of this is, of course, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I even toyed with the idea of putting that or another novel on and I thought, this is enough. But English, good. Cassidy, are you a history major? I think. History with education. And would you be a sophomore? Okay. Ryan. Okay, Ryan says you're a sophomore. And what is your major? Finance major, okay. Wait till you see French finances during the Austin says you're a sophomore. I think that's right, right? Or are you a junior?
I'm a freshman, but I have enough credits for sophomore, so I don't know what I am.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to purposely mess that up because I have credits as a junior, but last semester they put me down as a sophomore again, so I don't know what they're doing, but they just don't want us to be juniors. I don't think they do.
You're in the education program.
Oh, really? That explains a lot then.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
Okay. All right. And you're a history major, right, Austin?
Yes.
That's what I thought. How about Joseph Munford? We were in contact, right? Okay, and you go by Joseph or Joe? Joe, okay. Joe. Says you're a senior? And what is your major?
History with education.
Okay, history with education. Very good. How about Jennifer Morrison? Okay. You. And I just wasn't sure suddenly. Okay, and you go by Jennifer? And Jennifer, you're a senior. And your major must be history if you're working on your senior thesis. And is there anything else along with that?
No, I'm very committed.
All right, very good, very committed. That's what we like. Let's see, Allison, may I Germanize schön? How do you pronounce it?
Well, because I'm from here, so my mom and I are from here, so we say Schoner, but it's my dad's last name, and he's from Michigan, so he says Shaner. And if you're from Germany, you say Schöner, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you go by Schoner.
Yeah, that's just because my mom and I are from Colorado.
Okay.
We say it how it looks.
Yeah, yeah. So it means nice gentleman.
Oh yeah.
Or-
I just thought it was pretty.
Yeah, it can be pretty,
Something like that.
handsome,
Yeah.
schöner Hair. Yeah, yeah, lovely. Yeah, so it's all to the good. I mean, whichever.
They say it like Shaner. It's
Shaner.
weird. I don't know. My dad's family's from Detroit, so they say
Yeah.
it's weird.
Well, it originally would have had, I mean, the O with the E would have been an O with two dots over it, or even an O with an E over it,
Yeah.
a small miniature E over it. And I think for the tradition has been in English to pronounce that just as they do in Michigan,
Yeah.
the A sound. But okay, here you're Allison Schoner. Says you're a sophomore?
Yeah, I'll probably be here for another 3 years.
Okay. And what is your major?
I'm working on getting a distributed studies program with
Okay.
a French language primary, and I'm leaning towards doing history or anthropology as a secondary, and then a minor in museum and gallery management.
Wow. Nice combination.
Yeah. So if you need help with French pronunciation.
Yeah. Well, we will. I mean, my French is not that good at all. And by the way, one of the things you will see is that writers of French history in English have a habit that I really cannot understand, and that is they often render the French term without translation. And I would say, and I may be subjective on this, but I don't think in German history we do anything like that. That we may give the French term and then, the German term in parentheses, put a translation, and then we stick by the translation. I mean, you'll get the idea as you're going through this. Oh yeah, this is a kind of tax that the peasants had to pay, but they'll say champagne or something like that. Just you'll get used to just dealing with that. It'll be an irritation, but not for you. So that's interesting. That's interesting. You have a nice German name and you're learning French. You ought to go over and be a symbol of the EU. Okay. Lindsay Shelton. Okay. Lindsay says you're a junior. And doesn't, we were in, yeah, okay, contact by email too. And what is your major? History. Very good. Victor Shepard. Okay, do you go by Victor? Victor says you are a sophomore.
They just sent out the sheepskins from my other school this week. I know I'm a junior.
You know you're junior. Okay, good. And what is your major, Victor?
History with philosophy.
History with philosophy. Very good.
I wanted to do philosophy so bad, but I'm minor. Sorry, just
Yeah.
I'm here with the kids. I was highly recommended to you from Wayne Artist.
Oh yeah. Wayne Artist. Yeah. There's a great history professor for you. He also had my son in class some years back. Yeah, that's a nice connection. I, by the way, was a philosophy major as an undergraduate, not a history major.
Really? Did you enjoy it?
Yes, I did.
I'm so glad.
You may wonder how my thinking became so fuzzy in the meantime. But back then, I was rigorous and precise. No, I just saw Eric Hansen in the philosophy department, and I had written a paper about Saint Anselm when I was an undergraduate that had to do with his proof for the existence of God. And I could remember about 2/3 of that proof, so I ran it by Eric Hansen. He said he agreed that it sounded like Saint Anselm. So anyway, yeah, philosophy is an interesting combo. Amy, here you are, and you're a history with anything else, or just history major? Okay. And Caitlin, I know that you're history with education.
Yep.
Okay, and you're already well along in your education classwork, if
Yeah,
I...
I'm in the top program.
Okay, right. How about Dennis Vega? Okay. Dennis, you go by Dennis, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Dennis, this says you're a senior. And what is your major, please?
Psychology.
Psychology, okay. I'll wait till you get a hold of Napoleon. All right. I've given you a bunch to read. Do you have anything else you want to raise about this class? Any concerns, questions you have about logistics, ideas? Yeah.
The only thing I didn't see on the civil list was email.
Oh, I didn't put that on. Okay. It's R. Sackett. I neglected to do that. R. Sackett, the whole, lowercase letters, the whole last name, at uccs.edu. That's our usual formula for that. 8 letters of the name. Yeah.
So if we can't make a class for whatever reason, how do we watch the class? Am I only on TV or is it online as well?
I think it might be on YouTube.
Oh, really?
I think, at least one semester they did it that way. This is certainly on the UCCS station. I mean, right now instead of...
Is it only on Comcast or?
Yes, I think so. Channel 20. It's live. It's rebroadcast Friday afternoon at, I believe, 3 o'clock. And I think it's on YouTube. I'll check on that. I'm not sure about that.
My email address is
Yeah.
Martins with an E, so MARTENS at uccs.edu. And I did just send out an email to everyone, so you'll have it there.
Yes.
On the 27th, we will do the pages 1 to 216 on Wednesday.
I'm sorry. When is this? Yeah. So get cracking. I mean, it's coming. But yeah.
So you said the books will be in the bookstore here pretty soon?
Yes. Yeah, but you can also. Pardon?
Like, how about the library? So, like, during the time that it's not in the bookstore, is there any, can you be able to find
Well, there would be if there. I'm not sure about. I think Tackett is too recent. I don't think he's in the library. I think Susan Buck Morse is in the library, if I remember.
It would be horrible to get next month. This came out last
Tackett. By the way, let me say something. Yes, we read a lot in history, all right? You'll agree, those of you who are history students, we read a lot in history. But also, I think sometimes we read for main ideas and sample the detail. If you know what I mean, I mean, in graduate school they said, and now we're going to teach you how to gut a book. And I thought they said glut a book, and I was picturing book burning. Like, I thought, what? But the idea is that you get to the essential of the argument of a book, of the ideas of a book. For example, you read the introduction, you read the conclusion. You take the first chapter, you read the first paragraph or two, and go to the last paragraph or two. You read that. You go back through then, and you read every single topic sentence the rest of the way through, on the pretty safe assumption that historians have learned these sort of compositional writing techniques, such as you get in the composition program. And by the end, you've devoured a chapter of the thing, and it's maybe taken you 30 minutes to read a 40-page chapter, and you have an idea what it's about. And sure, if when you seem to be getting to something truly weighty, to then start glancing down into the paragraph. This is in effect skimming in history, to look down into the paragraph and see, well, what kinds of material is being produced to support this idea. Then sometimes, in graduate school, then you go to the back of the book to look at the notes to see, well, is this archival material or is this a publication of some type? How does the historian purport to know this? So I think there are ways to manage this reading in a way that you can get through, well, as you say, 216 pages the first week. It's just impossible to take the aggregate number of pages and divide them by the number of weeks and say, here, 87.4 every single week. So you'll see differences in the amount of reading. Yes?
So is that first reading section, is that for next week? Or
Yes.
is that assigned next week?
No, it's for next week. Yeah, this is prior to class read. That's what that always means. Yes?
So the library does have Tackett. It's in an ebook,
Oh, yeah?
and
Our library has
yes.
it. Oh,
So I mean, each of the book collections, the ebook collections the library has, depending on the publisher and the vendor, have different rules as to how many people can look at it at the same time, how many people can check it out at the same time, or whatnot. So it would definitely be worth looking into.
yeah, well, there you go. There you go. I mean, you're not such a huge class that... By the way, is there anyone whose name, Robert, I didn't get you. Your name is not on my list. Hopkins, Hopkins, right? Robert. And what, are you a junior? What are you in? You're a senior. About to graduate, okay. History and East Asian politics. Right. Right, okay, good. Anyone else whose name I did not call? Because some people sign up late. Okay, very good. Well, my friends, we will meet again on Wednesday, and happy reading in Tackett.